This is ARC PDX.
Hello everybody, welcome to ARC PDX. I'm Wesley Ogle, and every week ARC PDX is on the road in your community to dig into the stories that are authentic and relevant to you. This morning, we're diving into Portland's affordable housing. We're doing this on the heels of a recent report revealing that nearly 1,900 publicly subsidized affordable housing units in Portland sit empty, while thousands of people remain homeless on our streets. We reached out to city leaders and multiple local housing authorities and property managers of these affordable housing units to ask them why these units sit empty and a lot more. So let's quickly go through the process of getting into an affordable housing unit. Officials say generally when construction is done, the owner hires a property manager and they start accepting applications. A key term you'll need to know is Area Median Income, or AMI, which is set by the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development based on the Portland, Vancouver, and Hillsborough areas. This is a set income limit that determines eligibility for assisted housing programs. Some projects reserve units for people with very low income or people exiting homelessness. One of the organizations that we talked with, Home Forward, serves Multnomah County. They offer affordable housing units and they distribute housing choice vouchers, which helps make rent affordable for the lowest income households. According to recent data from our news partners at Willamette Week, around 900 of their units are currently vacant. They weren't able to join us live this morning, but Home Forward spokesperson Riley Onen sent us written responses to our questions. Home Forward says it takes this vacancy rate seriously. They say about 350 of their vacancies are in buildings that just opened or properties where leasing was paused during disaster-related repairs. They added that most of their longer-term vacancies are for units priced at 60% of AMI, and they aren't subsidized by the Housing Choice Voucher Program. Home Forward says families who are far below the income levels can't rent these units without help. They say, quote, if we had more federal funding, we could pair those subsidies with today's vacant units and move many more families into homes right away. And the families that can't afford these units can find units in the private market with very similar rent prices, and they may end up choosing that option for a number of reasons. Home Forward says it is taking multiple approaches, including more promotion and education campaigns to help families understand which types of homes they qualify for. They say they're also working with community organizations and Mayor Wilson's housing strike team to match eligible households to available units. As for longer-term solutions, Home Forward is pointing to efforts like the Supportive Housing Services Measure, which provided deeper rent assistance, and the Metro Housing Bond, which helped fund construction for units at the 30% AMI level. Now, we brought the same questions to the Portland Housing Bureau. They also were not able to join us live for our show this morning, but PHB is in charge of producing and preserving affordable housing, and it regulates a portfolio of more than 17,000 units across the city. They also work toward increasing home ownership for vulnerable and BIPOC communities, preventing displacement and ending homelessness through short-term rent assistance or transitional housing. The Bureau cited similar issues as Home Forward on what's leading to these vacancies, including a mismatch between incomes and affordability levels. When it comes to the 60% AMI units, PHB notes that the market rate buildings not only have very similar rent prices, they have easier application processes and no annual income recertification. They also say there's a larger share of tenants owing unpaid rent, and that's leading to more evictions. We asked PHB if Portland's affordable housing is actually affordable. They say the regulated units will remain regulated for decades, saying, quote, if and when the market shifts and market rate units become more expensive, these units will again be significantly more affordable relative to the market. We asked PHB what it's doing to try to fill these vacancies. They gave us a list of what they're working on right now, including the creation of an affordable housing listing service, which would track real-time vacancies of units in the city on a public website and help tenants find units that fit their needs. They're also working on strategies to help affordable housing properties offer lower rents. They say the housing owners and operators can't do that on their own because they need to pay their loans, their staff, and other operational costs. And PHB says that's limited by available funds because most of the Bureau's resources are earmarked for new construction projects only. PHB is also helping developers add state tax credits to projects, which reduces the interest rate on their debt, with savings passed through as reduced rent. PHB says it's also learned from the vacancy issue. So for new projects, they're asking teams to have more of a financial cushion when putting their loans together so that they can pay down their loans while offering discounts on those 60% AMI rents. The Housing Development Center is a nonprofit that has worked throughout Oregon and Southwest Washington in the last 30 years to build, develop, and sustain affordable housing. They weren't able to join us live for our show this morning, but I talked with Traci Manning, the executive director of that organization yesterday, and here's part of our conversation. Are you able to, in a sentence or even a word, describe like what the environment is like for affordable housing, specifically in Portland right now?
It is challenging. Yeah, it is challenging.
Can you tell me what some of those challenges are?
Sure. Yeah, I think that housing has gotten more expensive throughout every income level, every housing type, and it's hitting every community. You know, the cities have been getting more expensive for a long time, but I just saw a headline that rural area housing has gotten a lot more expensive in the last few years. And so that's just hard. Incomes, particularly low incomes, have not kept up with what housing costs. And in addition to that, during COVID, and again, it impacted a lot of people and a lot of industries, costs really went up. Labor, maintenance, repair, utilities, insurance. And so all those things that hit us in our own homes also hit affordable housing, and there's less resources, there's less rent to pay for it. And then interest rates spiked at the same time, which really impacted the cost to build affordable housing. So it was just sort of this perfect storm of expenses going up and then need also going up. You know, a lot of service workers lost their jobs during COVID. And it's, you know, the economy, thank goodness, is recovering. But again, it's that real mismatch that the whole country is feeling about the expensive housing versus what we have available to pay for it.
How are those challenges like manifesting themselves? What is this leading to right now in Portland?
Yeah. It has made housing people at the lowest incomes in particular even more challenging, because there are, even if you have no mortgage that you have to pay on your apartments, and we almost don't, you know, there's always a mortgage, but even if you have none, you still have to pay the expenses to operate the building. And so if people's ability to pay rent is going down and expenses are going up, then you see people that have it makes it harder for people to pay their rent on time, you know, or it makes it harder for them to be able to afford the unit at all. Again, even if there isn't a huge mortgage. And then at the same time, there is a housing shortage for all income levels, right? You hear nurses, teachers, seniors. And so we're at the same time trying to produce more units that are affordable to all income levels. And so there's this trade-off between the volume of units that we want to produce, which is more and more and more, so we can house people, and the affordability of units that, you know, a unit that has a rent low enough that somebody can afford. And then if you kind of pile onto that someone who's homeless and maybe their income is really constrained, maybe they just have, you know, they're a senior and they just have Social Security, or they have a veteran's pension or something. It's not very much money. And so it's everybody with great intentions is really struggling.
Who could actually help in a situation like that of, you know, helping people be able to afford those affordable units that aren't affordable for them?
The federal government does and has historically used rent subsidies to as a way to get people into units, right? And that funding has been cut the last year. And so there are fewer rent subsidies that are available. That would, I mean, I don't want to be, that would instantly solve the problem, right? And that's a resource that the federal government has provided in greater volume in the past to try to provide assistance, usually for folks who um, oftentimes have a long-term disadvantage in having income, right? If Social Security is your only, if you're elderly, if you're disabled, if you're a veteran, and increasing your income is not really an option for you anymore. Historically, the federal government has come in and provided a rent subsidy so that you can live comfortably, maybe not, and that resource was cut. So that makes a difference.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to ARC PDX. I'm Wesley Ogle, and every week, ARC PDX is on the road in your communities to dig into the stories that are authentic and relevant to all of you. This morning, we are diving into Portland's affordable housing. We're doing this on the heels of a recent report revealing that nearly 1,900 publicly subsidized affordable housing units in Portland sit empty, while thousands of people remain homeless on our streets. We reached out to city leaders and multiple local housing authorities and property managers of these affordable housing units to ask them why these units sit empty and more. So joining me right now is Portland City Councilor Mitch. He's been a major advocate for the systemic shift in how we house people. Mitch Green, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
You're our first repeat guest here on ARC on the Road. I really appreciate
it.
Yeah, I know you should feel honored. Okay, so first, help us understand, what is the environment like right now for affordable housing in Portland?
Well, first I'll say that affordable housing is suffering from the same struggles that even market rate developers have struggled, which is that their cost basis for their units and for their balance sheets and portfolios is pretty high. Relative to how the market has shifted over the years. And so if you look at the 1,900 units or so, that's roughly 6 to 7% vacancy rate for affordable housing. You look at market, it's 6 to 8% vacancy for that too. And so I think what that shows is we've had this this inability for prices and rents to adjust to current market conditions, which is a problem plaguing everyone.
Yeah, and I'm hearing federal funding is having an impact too. How has that impacted our affordable housing?
I mean, the thing is it's already a challenge, and then you get the federal government saying, we're just going to make that a little bit more difficult, which puts the onus on local and state governments to step up to the plate when the federal government kind of kicks us when we're down.
What worries you the most right now about the environment that you're seeing?
I think the thing that I worry about is you've got the public watching, and they see a headline like 1,900 units, and they say, what the heck? What are we doing? And so I think to be good stewards of the public trust, and this is a city that loves to take care of its neighbors, we have to step forward and say, how can we think differently to take care of that low-hanging fruit right now and deliver wins that's also still a good use of taxpayer funds.
And we'll get into those solutions that you have proposed for sure, but I do want to talk about these vacant units. Yeah. So when that headline, you're right, when that came out, I think that shocked everybody. 1,900 vacant units when we have so many people living on the street. What are the possible reasons for these units being vacant, and is that number really that concerning?
I'm very concerned about the number. Like everyone else, I would kind of raise my eyebrows. I had been hearing it from constituents who live in these buildings saying, hey, I think half my building's empty or a third of my building's empty. And when you think about folks who are entering homelessness, or they live in a car, or they couch surf with friends, you get frustrated that why can't we put those folks into those places? And so we need to be really thinking about how we can support those providers to get to a place where they can lower their rents, because the reason why there's that vacancy rate is the price for affordable housing units is really quite close to market.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a really huge opportunity for us to do a low-cost intervention.
And, taxpayers are helping to fund these affordable units that are empty. What would you say to taxpayers who are concerned that their money is just, going to an empty unit?
I would say this: the most cost-efficient and most economical way to provide capacity in affordable housing is to make sure you don't lose what you have right now. It's always going to be less expensive to preserve and stabilize those units,
Right.
subsidize those units, maybe enter a partnership with the providers to say, how can we take some of this debt off your balance sheet so you can lower the cost, than it is to go out and try to build new stuff,
Yeah.
which has a multi-year lead time and it's very expensive to do that.
Okay. I also want to ask you about the Portland Housing Bureau recently realizing that they had $20 million in unspent funds that was supposed to go to, help renters stay in their apartments. Do you have any idea of how they missed this money, and then what can actually be done with this money now that we know it's there?
Yeah, I think City Council still needs to engage in an investigation to figure out what happened with that money. Council has not been given a straight answer on that. What we do know is the Portland Housing Bureau director knew about this potential for funds in late July and early August. At the same time that we knew that we were going to be potentially facing a deficit in short run of business license tax of about the same volume of funds, and council wasn't made aware of that until November 20th. And so there are still open questions there, but fortunately I've got some colleagues who have come up with a plan to spend those funds and make sure that they're put in the right places to do exactly what I said earlier, which was like step up to the plate when the federal government is pulling away.
Okay, so let's talk solutions now. I want to start with Vienna. You took a trip to Vienna with a few of your colleagues to learn about social housing.
Yeah.
What did you find there? What did you learn?
Well, first of all, the thing that struck me the most is they spend about 430 million euro per year on their entire social housing program, which houses something like 60% of 2 million people in the city of Vienna. And they do it like that's about $266 per capita per year. In the city of Portland, it takes us about $688 per capita per year to not even house everyone. And so I immediately was struck by this idea that, well, clearly we can be better stewards of our money and get a better solution. The biggest difference that they have between what we do is they approach affordability from just saying, look, we check your income once when you come into this social housing program. We never check it again. And we offer it to a range of incomes, and it's a cost-based rent. And so when you go out, you mortgage, you build the development, you figure out what your costs are, and you set a rent that can cover those costs plus a maintenance margin. And then everyone has some security and some certainty around where they're going to live, and it's permanently affordable. We don't do that here. And instead what we've got is a very expensive low-income housing tax credit federal kind of model, and we've got a very expensive market model, and then nothing in between. And so I think when I came back, it's like, look, we have all this money that we spend in the community, in the city of Portland, in the metro, county. Why can't we just go out and start this program here by buying up these out-of-the-money properties from the market, or maybe helping these CDCs reset their cost base and hit the reset switch and do a cost-based rent model. And that's something I'm working on.
How confident are you that you can actually make that work here in Portland?
I'm very confident, and I think that it's one of these things where it cuts across the ideological spectrum, because I think when you talk to an average renter, of course they want their rents to be lower. When you talk to a taxpayer, they want their tax money to be spent wisely. So this is potentially a win-win for the community, and then we can move forward and approach our housing deficit like a planning problem, the same way a utility might approach its electric utility provisioning deficit.
Yeah.
So you do a forecast, you figure out what you need, and then you figure out the least expensive way to deliver that.
So when you came back and you presented all this to your colleagues, to maybe Mayor Keith Wilson, what kind of response did you get from them? What did he think about it? Did you get a response from him?
I didn't get a response from the mayor. Mayor's been very focused on these overnight shelters.
Yeah.
But what I heard from the Housing and Homelessness Committee, what I heard from practitioners and folks who have been in this space for a really long time was high interest. And there's these light bulbs that go off once you start to say, in the city of Portland, in this broader community, Tri-County region, we spent $720 million in fiscal year 2024, and we still have thousands of people unhoused. And we have almost 2,000 vacant units in the affordable housing sector. They're doing it in Vienna for a fraction of the price. So I think folks are very interested, and I think that we've got some green shoots here.
So what's the very first step? Like, what do you do right now to try to get the ball rolling on this?
The very first thing you do is you go out and you look at those apartment buildings that are out of the money, that are selling for pennies on the dollar, and you buy them. And that's something that the former Housing Bureau director was doing very successfully. She was going out and making tender offers, buying buildings that developers didn't want to hold anymore because it wasn't profitable for them anymore, and getting units at $100,000 to $200,000 a door. Now, it costs something like $400,000 to $600,000 a door to do a new affordable housing building. So that is the low-hanging fruit. We can do that for both market rate purchases, and we can do that with partnerships with the community development corporations who have these cost struggles, and I'm pretty hopeful.
Wow. Okay, and really quickly, we've got like 30 seconds left. Where could you get additional help? Like, where could the federal government, the state, the city help with something like this?
Well, I'm not really going to be looking to the federal government right now. I don't have a lot of hope there. But I know that Senator Pham had introduced a revolving loan fund bill in the last session that just needs some funds for that. $100 million as a kiddie to start this could really unlock a lot of capital and begin social housing.
City Councilor Mitch Green, thank you so much for coming back on ARC on the Road. Really appreciate it. Yep. Good luck with all that.
Thanks.
And another organization that we have talked to about this affordable housing issue is Oregon Housing and Community Services. This is the state's housing finance agency, which administers programs that provide housing stabilization. OHCS says it focuses on expanding and maintaining the housing supply. According to the 2024 Oregon Housing Needs and Analysis Methodology report by the Department of Administrative Services, the state needs to add nearly 500,000 housing units in the next 20 years to start addressing supply issues. OHCS says this means we can't build our way out of the crisis overnight, and that it will take time to see results, even with more money and better policies. Hello, everybody. Welcome to ARC PDX. I'm Wesley Ogle, and every week, ARC PDX is on the road in your community to dig into the stories that are authentic and relevant to all of you. This morning, we are diving into Portland's affordable housing. We're doing this on the heels of a recent report that revealed that nearly 1,900 publicly subsidized affordable housing units in Portland sit empty, while thousands of people remain homeless on our streets. We reached out to city leaders and multiple local housing authorities and property managers of these affordable housing units to ask them why these units sit empty and more. So let's quickly go through the process of getting into an affordable apartment. Officials say generally when construction is done, the owner hires a property manager and they start accepting applications. A key term that you'll need to know is Area Median Income, or AMI, which is set by the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development. This is based on the Portland, Vancouver, and Hillsborough areas. This is a set income limit that determines eligibility for assisted housing programs. Some projects reserve units for people with very low income or people exiting homelessness. Right now, we've got Margaret Salazar, the CEO of REACH. They develop, they promote, promote access to affordable homes and supportive services in Multnomah, Washington, and Clark counties. Margaret, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Can you explain a little bit further where REACH plays a role in affordable housing in the Portland area specifically?
Absolutely. So REACH is a nonprofit organization, and we develop, own, and operate affordable apartments across 3 counties. So we own just over 40 affordable apartment buildings, which is about 2,700 homes across those 3 counties.
And what are you seeing right now in terms of the environment, in a word or a sentence? Can you tell us what's going on right now with affordable housing in Portland?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we're seeing is we still have some resources available to build more affordable apartments, although those resources are under threat right now from federal budget cuts. And we see a lot of demand for affordable housing, but we're having some issues with making sure that we can reach the folks that can afford those units.
And what worries you the most when you think of the challenges that we're facing?
Well, a couple of things. I think one of the things that worries me the most is making sure that folks that we're able to house in affordable housing can afford to pay their rent, because when someone moves into one of our properties, that's really when our work begins to make sure that that family or that senior or that veteran can remain stably housed over the long term. And so what worries me is that folks are having their own economic challenges and may not be able to successfully remain housed and pay their rent.
You know, we've seen some stories too kind of recently that because of all of these, challenges with everything, all the costs going up, it's getting hard for people who are in these affordable housing units to pay their rent and to keep paying it. How big of an issue are you seeing of that at reach properties? Do you have a number of like how many residents you have who aren't able to pay their rent or are at risk of eviction?
We have between 10 and 20% of residents at any given time are falling behind on their rent.
Okay.
So it is a significant issue for us, and we do our best to try to connect residents with rental assistance resources and to develop payment plans and to connect folks with other kinds of income support, but it is an ongoing challenge as folks are facing the rising cost of living and just economic changes that are impacting our whole region.
Yeah, and what's the process of, someone maybe getting evicted from an affordable housing unit? What happens?
Yeah, so like I said, if someone falls behind on their rent, we really pull out all the stops to keep that person housed. So we're connecting folks with available resources, although there are far less available rent assistance resources than there were during the pandemic. A lot of those have burned off. And so unfortunately, we have had to do filings for non-payment evictions for some households. And what we're finding is that that process takes a long time and it's quite traumatic for our staff, for residents, and then often that rental assistance doesn't come until the day of the court date. When someone is literally facing that eviction. So that's a real challenge for folks.
Oh, yeah, that is. I want to dig into this CoStar report. We've been talking about it, found that nearly 1,900 affordable housing units in Portland are vacant. What do you think when you hear that number? Is that a concerning number? And what are the reasons that there are so many of these units empty?
Absolutely. So I will just say, this is something that keeps me up at night. It is something that we take very seriously at Reach. And we are fired up trying to do everything we can to fill every single one of our vacant units. I cannot sleep at night until I know every single home that we have available is leased up and is occupied by somebody that needs a safe place to call home. So I take this very seriously, and I was very happy to see the news get out there because I think we need more attention on this issue. It's a good problem to have because it means that we have some opportunities to get more folks housed. So that's something we take very seriously. I will say that typically you will have some vacancies, just like any apartment buildings. Folks move out, units turn over. Typically about a 5% vacancy is healthy and normal.
And this is what, like a 7.4?
7.4, 7.5. So we do have that piece that we can work with of extra inventory right now that I think offers an opportunity for us to do some really good things for our community.
So what are the reasons that you've seen that these units may be vacant?
Right, yeah, so I will try not to be too wonky. I know you defined area median income for folks.
Trying to make it easy to understand.
I'll break it down and give you an example. So in the Portland metro area, I recently looked up some of these numbers. If you're, say, a single parent with a kid living in this region, your income to be able to qualify for one of these homes is capped at around $55,000 to $60,000. So if you make more than that, you're not eligible to move in. But you have to make enough to be able to afford the rent. You're still paying the rent that's pegged on these units. So what we're finding is that as people's incomes have dropped and their purchasing power has dropped, for a lot of folks, they just can't afford the affordable rents. They're just not affordable enough. Or they make too much to qualify for those units, and they're heavily regulated from state and federal sources. And so what we're finding is that it's really tough to find those families and seniors that qualify. So if you are a family that's looking and you're at about that income level, please look up Reach. We would love to talk to you about finding you a home. But what we're finding is that a lot of the need out there is for folks that make too little to be able to pay the rent. And that's the disconnect that we have. It's really an affordability issue. But we can't just lower the rents because we have mortgages to pay on these properties. We have rising operating costs, just like all of us have in our daily lives, to keep the properties thriving, open, well repaired, and in good, stable conditions. So we just have a mismatch of the supply and the demand right now. But like I said, it's a solvable problem.
How do we solve it then?
Yeah.
What do we do?
So a couple of things I would say. So the first is, I think that to be able to reach those families, individuals, seniors, veterans who who are at that right price point and can afford the rents of these beautiful affordable homes, we need to make the process easier. So we need to engage with our public agencies to streamline the regulations as much as possible. There are reams and reams and reams of paperwork that folks have to fill out right now. And we need to take a hard look at that and figure out really what's necessary and how do we serve the community best and try to streamline out some of those requirements and make it easier for folks to move in to speed up that process. So that's the first thing. The second thing is to be able to reach those folks who are lower income or are exiting out of homelessness, who maybe have some short-term rent assistance to get started and moved in. We need to do a better job of connecting those vacant units with the service providers that are helping folks to get stably housed. Right now, we have a patchwork of different providers. You were mentioning getting to know this issue. There's a lot of folks involved.
It's really complicated, even to find out who to talk to about this.
Right, and so if you're a person that's seeking housing,
how are you going to find out?
Right.
Yeah.
So we can do better, and that's where I really want to sort of issue a charge out there for my colleagues and everybody working on this issue. We can do a better job demystifying this and connecting the dots between our available inventory and the services that are out there to get folks stably housed, and to make sure that not only do we have the resources to help someone move in, but long-term rental assistance to help them to be able to pay their rent. So there are resources in our community, not enough, but enough that we can make some progress on that issue and connect the dots. And then long term, we have some work to do to think about how to keep our properties operating well and potentially to be able to buy down those rents over time. And maybe we're restructuring the debt on these properties, getting some public subsidy in there to make the finances of each of these properties more sustainable, so that we're not just answering this issue for tomorrow, but we're thinking 5, 10, 15 years down the road, so that these resources will be sustainable for our whole community for years to come.
Margaret Salazar, CEO of Reach, great to have you on the show. That was wonderful insight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yep. Hello and welcome everybody to ARC PDX. I'm Wesley Ogle, and every single week ARC PDX is on the road in your community to dig into the stories that are the most authentic and relevant to all of you. So this morning we are diving into Portland's affordable housing. We're doing this on the heels of a recent report revealing that nearly 1,900 publicly subsidized affordable housing units in Portland sit empty, while thousands of people remain homeless on our streets. We reached out to city leaders and multiple local housing authorities and property managers of these affordable housing units to ask them why these units sit empty and a lot more. One of those organizations is Hacienda CDC. This is a Latino-led organization dedicated to advancing the social and economic mobility of all communities. So joining us this morning is Ernesto Fonseca, the CEO of Hacienda CDC. Ernesto, thank you so much for joining us on ARC PDX this morning.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Wesley. Happy to be here.
Of course, of course. Can you explain to everybody, just so they understand who you are, what does Hacienda CDC do in terms of affordable housing in the Portland area?
Absolutely. Hacienda CDC has been around since 1992. We are an affordable housing developer and service provider. In fact, we're one of the, recently by the Portland Business Journal, ranked number 12 as one of the largest developers in terms of production. So we're pretty serious on the affordable housing side, development and providing units across the state, as well as providing opportunities, for people to grow within those units through youth and family services, economic development, and small business development. So it is a whole package that you get with us, and I'm excited to be here and talk a little bit about more Hacienda and about this very serious issue that we call vacancies.
Totally. In a sentence maybe, or even a word, can you describe what the environment is like for Portland affordable housing right now?
Oh boy, it is very challenging. Very challenging. It's an understatement. There are so many issues that we're experiencing right now. Many properties that are underperforming. If anybody's paying attention, there is a number of organizations that I'm going to spare, saying their names here, but they are folding. They are selling their entire portfolios. They are trying to find some sort of lifeline, within the state or other agencies or financing institutions. Uh, but it's complicated. We're talking about a $1 billion industry that it will be difficult to save without the state and the federal support at this point.
Yeah.
So it is very, very
Wow.
challenging. In terms
Yeah.
of renting units, it's also a challenge. We can talk a little bit more about that once we get to it.
Yeah, we'll get to that in just a little bit. But I am curious, how is Oregon's Latino community in particular maybe uniquely impacted by these challenges?
Oh, the Latino community, it's actually pretty stable community, generally speaking, when it comes to housing. Hacienda, we are reaching almost 1,000 units right now. We have a 90%, 94% occupancy rate. We only have 26 units vacant right now. So on the housing side, the community tends to be, the immigrant community came here to work and, stay safe and build some wealth and all of that stuff. So with that, with that in mind, most of our properties are very stable when it comes to those families that we're trying to serve. But as everybody has seen, the issues that we face are not just economic, housing, health, or education. Right now, we're being impacted gravely by ICE. Uh, Everybody, we are on different group chats. We keep getting information that somebody was snatched either from school or from one of the properties ourselves. At Hacienda, we are consistently being watched, by allegedly ICE operatives in trying to see when we come in, when we come out, what we do, where we gather, and things like that. So it's a very stressful situation that we're going through at this moment in most of our main campuses, and I don't see the end of it. So that will compound the issues that we see in affordable housing, not only on the social well-being side, but also we're expecting to see more delinquencies as well as vacancies. Why would that be the case? Well, it's pretty simple, right? If you are, with your partner, husband, in a property and then you are split apart, you may not be able to cover the rent. You may not be able to take care of kids and still, cover all the financial responsibilities of having an apartment. So we're bracing for that. At some point we have already been dealing with some of that, but in a very scattered, level. Then what that means is that, we have seen somebody being split in a, community in Oregon City, some others in Hillsborough, Forest Grove, Gresham, and so on and so forth. We haven't seen a massive, massive attack on Hacienda at the main campus. So
Yeah.
that's something that
Yeah,
is
I want to
back in front of our minds.
I want to get to this CoStar report that we've been talking about that found nearly 1,900 publicly subsidized affordable housing units in Portland are vacant. When you hear that number, how do you feel about that? What does that say to you?
Well, let me just tell you another number because 1,900 units is just on the Portland metro region. It's 3,000 to a little over 3,000 across the state. That those units are vacant. Now, how does that make me feel? Well, it is a very serious systemic issue that we have on the regulatory, legal, as well as compliance and approving, these tenants. So it's a terrible way of doing business. We have to restructure, and we have to rethink the way we rent our properties to low-income families. And this is also part of our own doing. During the pandemic, our good intentions to provide and to support families during those years, created certain habits. We call them the legacy bad habits of the pandemic. Many people were they got used to the rent being paid, and it was over a year of that, happening, and that was probably the right thing to do, but not necessarily the right delivery in doing so. I am, guilty as charged. Many people took advantage of that system, didn't save, didn't provide, the layoffs, and the static of the economy was just momentarily. But over the years, over a year and a half of dealing with this, we developers started to suffer tremendously from rent losses, um, property upkeep. And then once the relief and the restrictions ended, it took us months and months and months to even try to get a hold of some of these individuals and to collect some rent. So many of them ended up being evicted, and being or leaving the property, right? Because it was better for them, better deal to leave than to stay. So
I want to really
that
quickly,
was a
Ernesto,
problem.
just because we only have about a minute left.
All right, so
We have about a minute
right
left. I want to really quickly get to solutions because I know that you've been involved in work groups with Governor Tina Kotek, Mayor Keith Wilson, and others in trying to spur multifamily housing development. I just want to know, how has that been going? Is that giving you hope? Is that making change?
Can you repeat that again? Sorry, I couldn't hear you properly.
Okay, I wanted to ask you, because you personally have been involved in work groups with Governor Tina Kotek and Portland Mayor Keith Wilson and others in trying to spur multifamily housing development here. I want to know how that work group is going and how you feel about the work that you guys are doing.
Well, the work that we're doing is extremely important. Just because we have a number of units that are vacant right now, doesn't mean that we have to stop, developing units. We have to work on both fronts. We have to develop new affordable housing units, and we also have to reform the system as to how we, rent properties to tenants. Right now, many of these tenants have a terrible rental history. So many of them, 80% of them, are being declined. So that is one of the reasons that we have so many vacant units. So we can fix that, and we can also fix we need to continue building more housing. Those units, 1,900 in the Portland metro region, are just a tiny fraction of the number of units that we need to really house the many thousands and thousands of residents that we have on the streets.
Right. Ernesto, Fonseca, thank you so much for joining us this morning. I wish we had 5 more minutes to talk to you. You have so much knowledge about this issue, but hopefully we'll be able to have you on the show again. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Wesley. We'll share it. Have a good day.
Welcome back, everybody, to ARC on the Road. One of the organizations that we talked with to find out why so many affordable units sit empty in Portland is Home Forward. They offer affordable housing units and distribute housing choice vouchers, which helps make rent affordable for the lowest income households. Now, according to recent data from our news partners at Willamette Week, around 900 of Home Forward's units are currently vacant. They were not able to join us live this morning, but Home Forward spokesperson Riley Onen sent us written responses to our questions. Home Forward says it takes this vacancy rate seriously. They say about 350 of their vacancies are in buildings that just opened or properties where leasing was paused during disaster-related repairs. They also add that most of their longer-term vacancies are for units priced at 60% of AMI, and they aren't subsidized by the Housing Choice Voucher program. Home Forward says families who are far below the income levels can't rent these units without help. They say, quote, if we had more federal funding, we could pair those subsidies with today's vacant units and move many more families into homes right away. And the families that can afford these units can find units in the private market with very similar rent prices, and they sometimes end up choosing that option for a number of reasons. Home Forward says it's taking multiple approaches here, including more promotion and education campaigns to help families understand which types of homes they qualify for. They say they're also working with community organizations and Mayor Wilson's housing strike team to match eligible households to available units. As for longer-term solutions, Home Forward is pointing to efforts like the Supportive Housing Services Measure, which provided deeper rent assistance, and the Metro Housing Bond, which helped fund construction for units at the 30% AMI level. We brought the same questions to the Portland Housing Bureau. They also were not able to join us live for our show this morning. PHB is in charge of producing and preserving affordable housing, and they regulate a portfolio of more than 17,000 units across the city. They also work toward increasing homeownership for vulnerable and BIPOC communities, preventing displacement, and ending homelessness through short-term rent assistance or transitional housing. Now, the Bureau cited similar issues as Home Forward on what's leading to all these vacancies, including a mismatch between incomes and affordability levels. When it comes to the 60% AMI units, PHB notes that the market rate buildings not only have similar rent prices, they have easier application processes and no annual income recertification. They also say there's a larger share of tenants owing unpaid rent now, and that's leading to more evictions. We asked PHB if Portland's affordable housing is actually affordable. They say the regulated units will remain regulated for decades, saying, quote, if and when the market shifts and market rate units become more expensive, these units will again be significantly more affordable relative to the market. We asked what PHB is doing to try to fill these vacancies. They gave us a list of what they're working on right now. That includes the creation of an affordable housing listing service, which would track real-time vacancies of units in the city on a public website, and then that would help tenants find units that fit their needs. They're also working on strategies to help affordable housing properties offer lower rents. They say the housing owners and operators can't do that on their own because they need to pay their loans, their staff, and other operational costs. And PHB says, excuse me, that is limited by available funds because most of the Bureau's resources are earmarked for new construction projects only. PHB is also helping developers add state tax credits to projects, which reduces the interest rate on their debt with savings passed through as reduced rent. PHB says it's also learned from this vacancy issue. For new projects, they're asking teams to have more of a financial cushion when putting their loans together so that they can pay down their loans while offering discounts on 60% AMI rents. We hope this made this issue, which is a really big one in our community, much easier for you all to understand. Welcome back to ARC PDX, everybody. We're wrapping up our time on the road this morning. We did a deep dive into affordable housing challenges in Portland and why recent data shows that nearly 1,900 publicly subsidized affordable housing units in Portland sit empty while thousands of people remain homeless on our streets. We asked city leaders and multiple local housing authorities and property managers of these affordable housing units why these units sit empty and the work that is happening to address this issue. If you want to see our full breakdown of this issue and our full conversations with city leaders and housing operators, you will be able to watch this full show on our K2 News YouTube page. We also have all of our ARC on the Road shows on there if you'd like to go back and watch those. Thank you all so much for joining this morning. We go on the road every Friday to dive deeper into the big story of the week, so please let us know what topic we should tackle next. Until then, have a great rest of your day and a wonderful weekend.